Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Ivey, and in today's show, I'm going to delve into a really important topic at the request of one of my listeners, and the topic is employee behavior and performance documentation, and specifically, how to get managers to document. Also, I have some really exciting news to share about my upcoming 2-day investigations virtual workshop. This is an episode you won't want to miss.
Welcome to the HR Investigations Podcast, exploring the issues, challenges, strategies, and solutions. Sponsored by RPCHR and hosted by Natalie Ivey, an HR consultant, licensed PI, and author of the best-selling book, How to Conduct Internal Investigations, a practical guide for human resource professionals. And now, here's Natalie.
Hey everyone, I am so glad to have you with me today. In a moment, I'm going to delve into the topic for today's show, but before I do that, I have a few important announcements to make. For starters, in case you missed it, the second edition of my book, How to Conduct Internal Investigations, a practical guide for human resource professionals, was just released on Amazon. I've been just delighted to hear from so many of you who have purchased the book and also got the supplemental toolkit that comes along with the book and are finding it really valuable. And to quote one professional, he said he was, quote, just geeking out and excited about the toolkit. So Chris, if you're listening, I'm really glad I could help you geek out over the interview templates and the other cool stuff in the toolkit. In the show notes for today's episode, I've provided a link to Amazon so you can check out my new book. All right, another important announcement, and I'm really super excited about this, is I've launched a new HR investigations training workshop, and it aligns with my new book, How to Conduct Internal Investigations, and the workshop is titled A Practical Workshop for Human Resource Professionals. So this 2-day workshop will be on July 23rd and July 24th from 11 a.m. Eastern to 4 p.m. Eastern. And originally, what I announced in the last episode was it was going to be in Daytona Beach at one of the resorts. However, after discussing it with my team, we have elected to make this a virtual event via Zoom. And also, if you've never been to the Central Florida area in July, it is kind of hot. So if we do one that's in person, it'll probably be a little bit later on in the year when it's not quite so hot. Now, in attending that workshop, you'll learn how to navigate tricky employee relations issues, how to assess when to open an investigation and when not to, how to prepare for and conduct effective witness interviews, how to gather and preserve evidence, and how to prepare a final investigation report. Also, on day 2 of the workshop, you'll work on a mock investigation. Yeah, and it's based on a real investigation, but names have been changed to protect the innocent. But it's very much a hands-on practical experience where you're going to apply what it is that you've learned in the first, really 2/3 of the class. Then also, once you complete the class, you will receive a certificate of training indicating that you've attended a 10 contact hour professional development program. And for those of you who already have your certification in HR, you will earn 10 HRCI and SHRM credits. And also in the show notes for today's episode, I've provided a link to the RPC Human Resources website at rpchr.com, where you can get all of the details and register for the workshop. I do want to just make mention of this. I encourage you to register early for this one because this is my first workshop and there's a lot of excitement around my new book. I do know that we're going to cap out the attendance for this one. So I encourage you to register early and also take advantage. I'm offering a premier access discount available only until June 15th, and that'll give you $100 off the regular registration price, and it gets you a free author-signed copy of my new book shipped to you. So remember, seats are limited because this is virtual, and I always cap attendance in any of my virtual events. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask questions and be able to interact with one another, and if you get way too many people on a virtual, it just gets too crazy, and it's not effective as a learning environment. So register early so you can secure your seat. Now, let's talk about today's topic. And this is one that I consult on a lot with our clients here at RPCHR. And that's the issue of managers just not documenting employee behavior and performance issues. I have a listener, Andrea, who wrote in about this, and I thought it would really make a great topic for the podcast. So thank you, Andrea. Here's what she asked. Natalie, how can I get my managers to actually document? They come to me ready to fire an employee, and when I ask them to give me documentation to support firing the employee, they just don't have it. Or they say they've had numerous conversations with the employee, but they really can't tell me when. And when I push back, they get very angry with me and sometimes just go to the owner of the company, and then they just fire the employee anyway. This is a problem, isn't it? Well, having been in HR for as long as I have and been a consultant for many years, and also my years even before starting RPC, I ran an HR department. I had 2,200 employees in 7 locations. So I can tell you, I've been in Andrea's shoes with some rather hard-headed managers, usually the operations team. And this is a common problem that often leads to a lot of conflict between HR and managers. And let's face it, ops people particularly, they're very busy, they're very results-oriented, and although they fundamentally get risk management from a safety standpoint, they don't often really see eye to eye with HR on the documentation of employee issues. They just don't see it as an important risk management strategy, and certainly not as important as safety. They should, but they don't. All right, to dig into this topic, let's first start with why we need good performance and behavior documentation. Well, if you just fire an employee at will without any sort of documentation that supports that this employee did engage in some kind of misconduct that violated your policy, or maybe if the employee wasn't meeting performance expectations, well, you can do that. And I do have business owners that sometimes are a little hard-headed and they'll say, well, but we're an at-will employer. We don't really have to give them a reason. Well, I get that. But if an employee goes to the EEOC and files a charge of discrimination, and you've got no paper trail leading up to that separation of employment, right? Like it used to be in the I Love Lucy show when Ricky would say to Lucy, you have some splaining to do, right? I still love that show to this day. If you haven't seen an I Love Lucy, go check it out on Get TV or one of those vintage TV apps. It's just really fun. All right. But anyway, he used to say, you got a lot of splaining to do. And what happens is that when you don't have that documentation, an EEOC investigator is going to kind of see that as a bit of a red flag. Well, why didn't you? What would be maybe the pretext for you really wanting to fire this employee? Could it be that you are doing something illegal like discriminating? Perhaps. I can tell you that if I were doing the intake of the charge, I would be questioning it. Maybe the supervisor was biased and thus discriminated. All right. If this company doesn't document, well, maybe they aren't very organized. And generally, organizations that aren't very organized like that and don't do a really good job of creating a paper trail, they're usually a lot of the times the ones that make discriminatory decisions. So therefore, you're probably going to have an investigator that will spend a little bit more time on evaluating that charge. That's not really what we want, do we? Generally, when employers just rest on that at-will doctrine, which, by the way, is really, really old, I mean, late 1800s, and just rest on that doctrine and separate an employee, it really just looks like there was another motive. I can tell you an EEOC investigator, a friend of mine, she's now retired, Regina was her name, and she could kind of smell what looked bad, right? She could kind of smell that there was something not quite right about how an employee was separated. That's definitely not what we want. All right. Our whole position should be risk management, and let's avoid that. But also, let's treat people fairly, shall we? Well, when there's a paper trail, that means that you have documentation that shows good faith on behalf of the employer. So if you do have an employee who later does file a charge with the EEOC or maybe a state agency, if you do have, like Florida, we have the Florida Civil Rights Act, and sometimes people will file under state statute. Or you could sometimes even have employees who just seek out legal counsel. Well, the fact that you did actually have documentation that indicated there was a behavior or a performance problem, you now have backup that supports the actions that you took and that they were not discriminatory. If you issued numerous disciplinary warnings because the employee wasn't showing up on time for work, that's a pretty darn good paper trail. And the evidence is going to be right there in your time and attendance system, right? Or if there were performance expectations and deadlines that were imposed and then the employee simply didn't meet them. Either you meet deadlines or you don't, you see? Also, when managers just sort of waltz into HR wanting to fire an employee and they haven't documented, they often feel like HR is the enemy. Of course, we all know that HR isn't the enemy, but a lot of times these leaders view that situation that way because they just see HR as an obstacle to what they really want to do. They want to get rid of an employee that they perceive is a poor performing employee, or as I often hear, has an attitude problem. You heard that before, didn't you? All right. Sometimes managers are very, very quick to just separate people instead of actually trying to do good performance management and coaching. And in my experience, when they do this, they're usually either inexperienced managers or they are experienced technically, and they may have even been with the organization for years, but because of their tenure, they sometimes kind of feel entitled to kind of just dictate to HR what's going to happen. Okay, so they'll just tell HR, well, this employee is gone and we're going to fire him tomorrow. They just sort of make a statement instead of consulting with HR. So the root causes here. One is managers who are like this, they really don't have an understanding of labor and employment law. They do not understand the risks associated with just firing an employee without documentation of either some kind of misconduct where they were in violation of policy or poor performance that hasn't met certain performance expectations or standards. Number two, the managers who were really quick to just move to a separation without documentation, they also usually haven't had the right type of training on how to document. All right, so here's the solution for that. Show them. Give them copies of what good documentation looks like as an example to follow, right? Show them how to keep good coaching notes to memorialize conversations with employees, dates, times, and details. Then number three, some managers' job designs have shifted so much that they are really not operating like leaders at all. They're in essence another worker bee who's expected to do the work just like their employees while also doing the supervisor thing. This is definitely dysfunction junction, and it's no wonder you're not getting documentation. These folks are probably working ridiculous hours just trying to keep up. What's the solution? Evaluate the job design and see if they're really stretched to capacity and make some changes. Also, if they're challenged with keyboard skills, do a tutorial. Show them how to use the dictation tool in Microsoft Word. It's a game changer and it will improve their productivity. Imagine if, let's say you have a field services manager who works out of his truck every day, supervising technicians who work on maybe customer equipment. Okay, this manager has sort of a mobile office and is only back at the brick and mortar office periodically. So he has to have a system for documenting conversations with employees while not in an office setting. Okay, solution. Coach managers to use an app on their phone to memorialize performance conversations with an employee. So here's an example. Let's say on my phone, I have an iPhone and use voice memo. All right, so if I'm the manager, it's May 15th at 2:45, and I just had a one-on-one conversation with Tech Brandon Smith while on site at the Zenith job site. Came by to oversee the job and noticed that Brandon was making the same mistake that I talked with him about before. Brandon pulled an X25 cable when he needed to use an R25 cable. I talked with him about it. He recognized that he was about to make the same mistake again. I told him if he'd installed the wrong cable on this job, it could have caused some serious damage to the customer's equipment. Brandon got a little bit of an attitude and said, "No way, man. This job needs an R25. I then pulled out the spec sheet and pointed to what was required. At that point, he admitted that he made the mistake and said he would pay closer attention. I advised him that this was a formal warning and he has to pay closer attention to the job specs. And I told him if it were to happen again, it will be a corrective action letter in his file, since I've already given him a verbal warning on May 7th when he was on the Carter job site." Okay, so there you have it. That's simple, easy peasy. So the manager in the field captured that on his phone. Now all he needs to do is transfer that to his laptop in his Brandon Smith folder. A good recommendation is to just have a folder for each direct report, keep it on the desktop, password protected, please. In a simple Word document, all the manager needs to do is hit the dictation button, and then he can literally just play the recording from his app on his phone, like voice memo on an iPhone or whatever it is on an Android, and then just literally play it right into the laptop. The dictation tool will just document it for him, and voila. Now, some of you may even have your own sort of documentation apps that you could create for your managers. So for managers who may be a bit challenged with the how-to, we need to help them with methodology to accomplish what we're asking. If you just keep harping on it, well, you need your documentation, but you're not telling them how, okay, you're probably going to continue to have the same problem over and over again, where they're not going to do it because you're not closing the gap on the how part. Right? If we keep showing disappointment and also are overly critical at their lack of documentation, it still isn't solving the problem. Right? So we've got to teach them. We've got to give them the tools to get it done right. Okay, now let me cover a few documentation tips. What managers really get wrong. Okay, number one, you need to teach them to document by giving them examples of what you want to see. In investigative work, we refer to things like that as an exemplar, right? A sample. Number two, explain to them that they have to give specifics, dates, times, and details as I illustrated with the field manager capturing on his phone the one-on-one performance conversation he had with the tech, Brandon Smith. The details matter, okay? Explain that they need to also tie behavioral issues to your organization's policies, such as an employee who was rude to a customer. The manager needs to cite the rude behavior as perhaps a violation of the code of conduct, or maybe a violation of your organization's values or respectful workplace policy, whatever it is in your organization. If a performance issue, then the manager needs to cite which performance standard isn't being met. In the Brandon Smith example, it was Brandon's failure to perform the work according to the job specs and making the mistake with just simply not paying attention and using the wrong cable. 3, teach managers that they need to also record positive conversations they've had with employees, okay? And I'm not saying physically record it, recording with the employee. What I'm saying is you need to be documenting and making note of really great things that employees are doing. All right, here's an example using the field manager recording the performance conversation that he had with another employee, Shelby Curtis. All right, so he had a great interaction, but now he's just using his phone. He's maybe sitting on the tailgate of his pickup truck out in the field, and he's just kind of, quote, making note of it, but recording it into his app. So here's what it might sound like. Today is May 15th at 4:30 afternoon, and I'm out at the Davenport job site. Mr. Davenport, the owner, just pulled me aside to tell me how happy he was with the repair job that Shelby did. He said he'd had 2 other vendors out here to do this repair, and neither one could diagnose the problem. He said Shelby showed up on time, got to work, and within 20 minutes diagnosed the problem and fixed it within an hour. He said we have all his future business, all of it, because of how this has saved him money in getting his equipment back up and running. I'm going to talk with my boss, Gene, the superintendent, and have him send Shelby a text thanking her for a job well done. You see, that doesn't take very long, does it? And you need to make note of these situations just as much as the performance improvement conversations. Also, when managers are balanced, and let's say Shelby made a mistake on a job on something else, it isn't going to sting so much when that manager goes to deliver that performance feedback because the manager has been balanced and also pointing out really great things that Shelby's done too. It's got to be both. It's got to be the positive as well as the feedback for improvement. All right, that's it for today's show. I hope this episode was helpful, and thanks again to Andrea for emailing her question about documentation with managers. And to all of you in my audience, I do love getting mail. Just email me at natalie@rpchr.com and let me know your questions, and if it's something that will appeal to the majority of my listeners, I will then discuss it on my show. And also remember to check out the show notes for today's episode to learn more about my upcoming 2-day virtual investigations workshop happening on July 23rd and 24th from 11 to 4 Eastern Time. Until next time, see ya.
Thanks for joining us today on the HR Investigations Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show with any colleagues who will benefit from our strategies and solutions. For free bonus resources, simply visit hr-investigations.com. And remember, if you'd like some help with improving your investigative skills, or if your organization is in need of an external investigator to help with a case, please get in touch with us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.